Welcome back to another Fame Log. Today I want to talk about what we did this week and some more feedback that I've had from my tutors. So we started off this week doing the Junior Festival, which is essentially a series of kind of things that the students have been working on. So I Want to Make Magic is in there, There She Goes is in there, and the flamenco and the Spanish dance is in there. So we started doing that and I was put into the Spanish dance, which is very, very fun. I spoke about this last week and I said how I wanted to work on my kind of, I spoke about what Spanish dancing is and how your persona changes kind of the mood of the dance. So I spoke to Rosie because she does Latin and she gave me some tips on my kind of my arms and my feet and how I present my face. So that is some information that I've taken on board. So that's what we did this week in terms of ensemble work. I got some feedback this week from Liam about my actual written work and what I'm doing and how my logs are being consistent and things like that. But he also spoke to me more about the psychology that I wanted to look into that I spoke about last week. Last week I spoke about Marlowe's hierarchy and the psychology behind it and what it means for Mr. Myers as a character. I spoke about how his relationship with Carmen depends on her psychology, if that makes sense, and how kind of my own experience as the teacher would impact how I say things on stage when talking to her. And I took myself away, and essentially what I want to look at is a different take on it. So Mr. Myers' kind of hierarchy and where he is. So he's got the emotional connection, he's got food, water and things like that, he's got the basics, and then the next level of that is shelter and things like that, and that's definitely something that I think he has. Is obvious. He's got a job and he's got people he cares about and he's got good relationships with the teachers, which is clearly shown in the script and in a lot of the shows that I've seen of it. And essentially what I found out is that he's at the top, so he wants to make kind of himself the best version of himself and be a better person. Like, he's got everything he needs, but what he's trying to do now is, because he's at the top, he's just making everything in his life kind of, he just wants to make it the best, if that makes sense. And that I also had an idea of, like, the take on how that would relate to Carmen and maybe even Job in some instances. So if Mr. Myers is trying to be the best person he can, what kind of things would he do? He would want to help Carmen, which is seen in what he says on the stage. So that is also kind of a what if as well that I've looked into. So what if he actually wants to help Carmen, which is something that I've also written in my logs. But I also found some more research in this other book that I picked up from the library, which is Theatre Studies, The Basics by Robert Leach. Now, on page 8, on the chapter of performance and performing identity, and he talks about he writes about Evering Goffman. He was a anthropologist. I think that's the word, I can't say it very well. And he kind of talks about how we present ourselves in our daily life, and that when we're on stage we have kind of a front, a mask or a persona, and we perform this on stage. And what I found out about it is kind of how like what he speaks about is his conclusion was that there is no difference between appearance and reality, and the performance we give in any encounter is in one sense simply skin deep and an appearance, but is also the reality of how we behave. So when I think about the scenes that I do on stage, even as an ensemble member, when I'm doing my dancing, it is all based off of a kind of a take that I have on that situation. So something that has actually happened to me in my real life. I mean, of course it is, because where else am I going to get the idea of doing it? I would have had to experience it, and I would have had to actually do it to understand it. And that's what I found interesting about this book, is how he kind of talks about that being a real life thing and how that relates to a situation. And then moving on from this, in also the same book that I found a section on playing. I spoke about how last week that I wanted to have a different take on my character, because Liam said how it is very important to find more than one correct answer. And in this book, I found a page that essentially talks about playing, which is a massive thing. It's got a massive thing to do with theatre. You're constantly playing around and figuring out what you want to do, and it has it in the literal sense of playing and messing around, being a kid again, and things like that, but also playing with things. So seeing if this works and seeing if this doesn't work, if this has a better take on something. And it put it in perspective of kind of what I could take on as an actor. And the word play has been divided into 3 types: active play, playing with things, and playing with others. Each of these is a kind of performance because it each involves a measure of pretending, a magic if, which enables the player to enter a world of make-believe. So when we talk about play acting and things like that, we base it off of real life situations. And when we're playing, we enter a world of make-believe. But it also seems real because it's based off of real life events. And I've spoken before about Stanislavski and Hagen and their takes on it and things like that. And it's just something that I want to take on board even more. So this week, that is essentially what I did. I took on board a different scenario in the classroom when Joe is talking about not being able to keep it down. In that scene, he has interactions with Carmen, he speaks to Serena, he speaks to Nick, and he also speaks to Joe. All these different scenarios, as I had a different take on it. Last time I spoke about how I was quite sarcastic and how I paid attention to Carmen and how I was really intrigued by what Serena was saying, and how what Nick was saying was like he was, I can't think of the word of it, but I had an interaction with him. So what I did this time this week is that I had a completely different take on it. And I didn't even look at Carmen at all. I wanted to kind of give the impression that I didn't want anything to do with her. I didn't agree with what she was doing, or I kind of knew what was going to happen to her in the future, so I didn't want to pay any attention to it. And it created a different mood and atmosphere, I felt like, on the stage. It felt quite tense, but then you have this massive thing of Joe's part of the story, and I'm really intrigued to what's going on, and that's the take I had on it this time. Last time I was disgusted by it, and this time I was intrigued. I was like, yeah, like, what you feel is valid, what's going on is valid. And I think that having that different take on it, now I've got kind of 2 options for that scene. And I also did the same for the scene where I'm walking, where Carmen asks me if she can go to this audition, and I'm like, well, no, you don't need another character to hide behind. And this time I did it, I was very bitter. And it just makes it adds a different level to both of our storylines. And it was great fun. It was great fun experimenting and playing and having those different things. And I think what I would do this time, as I also spoke to Cheryl, and she gave me some feedback, some specific feedback, and she said that what I tend to do when I'm on stage is I start off really loud and clear. Obviously, I project on the stage, and then when I got to the end of what I was saying, I sped it up a little bit. So that is something that I would like to improve on. It's not something I do all of the time, but it's something that I often slip up on. So that is something that I will be doing next week. And I just think with what I'm doing with my research, it's helping me massively. And I'm very, very happy. But this is the book that I've been reading, as well as the other book that I've been reading as well, which is Acting Characteristics. And this one is Theatre Studies. And it's proving very useful. And I will link the biography in my written logs. But yeah, that's where we are.